Okay, so this is Ed Martinez. This is the sound of my voice. And please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Sierra Russell, part of RussellFX.
And I'm Josh Russell, the other half.
Excellent. Thank you very much for doing this interview. And let's start off with, first of all, I understand, that you guys have worked together with this director before, and this particular project, I assume, you just went from that project into this project. So please tell us about what happened, in the beginning in pre-production and design phase. Of course, you guys are responsible for all the Cenobites and, physical, practical makeup type effects.
Right. So Dave had been working on this for probably around a year before we were brought into the fold. And he had been working with the 2D designer, Keith Thompson, who's the same guy that designed the creature for The Ritual, which is another movie we did with Dave in 2016. Keith is a brilliant designer. We've hired him a few times for different jobs of our own. So when they came to us with this stuff, they were pretty far along in knowing the direction they wanted to go with it. We still had opportunity for input in there, but like the general conceit of what the Cenobites are was nailed down. Sierra, anything to add?
No, you pretty much got it.
Okay.
So did they bring you, pre-production illustrations, like stuff done with Photoshop or, pen and paper?
Keith Thompson's designs are probably done in some digital software, because I've just noticed the way that we can ask for changes and he can edit them so quickly. But the style looks very much hand-drawn. So I'm sure he's just using like comic book artist software or something like that. It looks very like tactile, not Photoshoppy at all.
Yeah, I would say I would have to like look again, but if anything, like they're as far as with Hellraiser goes, but we've worked with Keith before. I wouldn't put it past that he would do some hand drawn and then digitally download and then clean up in the process.
Embellish it.
Yeah, there's a lot of artists, and you have to do that anyways because changes are coming as well. And he is so fast on changes, which is another beautiful thing about him. So yeah, he's a phenomenal designer, and it's always wonderful to talk to him. We turn into little children every time we talk together about ideas.
I love that. So please go on from when you got designs and, what was your next steps?
So the first thing that we did, actually before we were hired, we were given the designs and had a meeting date set 3 days later to talk to the studios. So Sierra and I just decided to go for it and stayed up for like 36 hours straight, sculpting our interpretation of the pinhead design in a maquette form bust. And when we had our meeting with them over Zoom, we presented that to them, mainly just to show that we could work quickly and the level of quality that we're able to deliver so fast, because we knew it was going to be a quick turnaround once things were moving. But that was also a really useful tool for us to just hone in on the designs with Dave and Keith, because while we were following sort of what had been presented to us to our interpretation of it, it turned out Dave felt that it wasn't really the style he wanted to go for. Ours is much like gory, like really gory looking and butcher shop style, very bloody and pulled skin. And we found out what he was really trying to get out of the Cenobite designs was like a very ornate and clean, stylized design. So the whole idea behind the Cenobite design is that none of them are wearing any sort of man-made costumes. They're just naked bodies with twisted and pulled flesh in elaborate fashion that make them look costumey, but when you examine it, it's all flesh and bone, muscle tissue. Dave just wanted that stuff to look ultra clean, like it was tailored.
Tell me more. How did you go from there to physically creating that?
Sierra?
I mean, that was kind of one of our hardest because we were also trying to keep it grounded as well. There were certainly elements that do help because, again, back to Keith's design, there isn't crazy detail. This is some designers, it's, you're to the T, like this is a perfect circle here. This is, whatever it is. With him, it left, which was wonderful, especially for an artist. It left room for, kind of trying to figure those things out. There's elements on some of the Cenobites where, it's almost as if there's a corset or something like that. And, we're using basically like tendons to be the string opposed, to, and also the bone structure. So it's also keeping it otherworldly to make sense, because also if you did twist someone's flesh, you only have so much to work with as well. So these are, other realm demon type designs. So that process was a lot of fun, but it was pretty exhausting trying to figure out, like, well, what would this be right here, and also not getting stuck in our heads like, well, this is where the liver is, like, yeah, I mean, process wise, and that was, we had a really big crew as well, and every artist is different, so bringing on some, wonderful sculptors and everything, and we're all staring at these photos together like, well, yeah, what is that? Like, what would it be? What does look good? What does make sense? Or at least, what can we do that makes it look pretty but also grotesque?
Was all this done in your shop in LA, or?
Yes, it was. One challenge with the whole thing getting started, like you're asking, the next step that we had to take, we were held up for quite a while on getting into the real production of making these things, because they just didn't have the cast nailed down that we're going to be wearing these things. So instead, we just started to bring in the artists that we wanted to work with and get them started on their own versions, their own interpretations of the design, and doing some more concept pieces so that we could present that stuff to Dave.
Can you name off some of those people?
Some of the people we had in here?
Yeah, some sculptors. And
yeah, the first one we brought in was Mikey Rotella. He's a guy
I love Mikey. I know Mikey.
Yeah?
Who doesn't like Mikey?
He's from Colorado. He worked at Distortions and stuff.
Yeah, he knows everyone somehow. It's amazing. But we met him years ago working at ADI, and he was the first call, because we just agreed that if we're gonna make Chatterer, that's Mikey's thing. Like, no two ways about it. And we knew basically, or hoped, but pretty much knew that would lure him in. We knew he's busy. He's always busy. He's always working somewhere. But, if he was willing to take the side work, it would be for that character. And then once he was in and he was starting to play with it and having a lot of fun with the rest of us, he just started telling more of the guys he was working with over at K&B. So we ended up roping in Dave Grasso, who I had known from all the way working back on Jurassic Park and Terminator 2. I was like elated that he would want to come in. And cool. Jeremy Aiello.
Oh, Jeremy! He's one of my best friends. He's from my area here. Oh my God.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. I worked with him when he was a teenager.
He's the guy that sculpted the new Pinhead.
Awesome. Oh my God. Last time I saw him in person was on the set of Candyman 2, and he was in a trailer putting, bee makeup on a guy, and I jumped in there and helped.
He's the biggest sweetheart. He actually just texted me today because Entertainment Weekly put out the new images. You get to see Pinhead for the first time. He was like, "Hey, it's really happening. People are digging it. Great."
The new Pinhead and the mask.
Yeah. It's funny that they're putting a lot of focus on the mask character, because it almost didn't even happen. We were so strapped for time. We sort of had our main 5 Cenobites that, of course, had to be in the movie, and then there were 2 peripheral ones. And like all the way through the middle of the production, Dave was still going, are we gonna have time to do this? Maybe we should just scrap them. And we ended up doing them, and then Mask turned out to be just like everyone's favorite on set. He looked so interesting and strange.
How did you do the head removal? Was that like a blue screen or green screen sock over the guy, or?
Yeah, we did green screen on him. And then they, especially with time and everything. So there was a shot that would have been really cool that we never got to do. It was pretty big. It was kind of almost like looking through his, or lack thereof, his dome and skull.
That sounds so cool. So anyways, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So Jeremy got hired. Then what happened?
Put Jeremy to work right away on creating a pinhead bust, and I sort of just decided I'll have him do it in the form of a silicone mask. And I said, just run wild with it. Here's the designs. Do what you do, man. Like, you're way better at this than us.
What about the live cast? Whose live cast was it on? Did you have Jamie?
We didn't have Jamie yet. She was probably still a month out from getting signed on. They were still mulling over trying to figure out who they wanted it to be. And I just didn't want to sit around and wait on it. So we took one of those Monster Makers, like generic bust.
Oh, right.
And I just had to make a silicone mask. And I just figured, worst case scenario, we'll have this awesome sculpture, but we can probably use this in a lot of ways in production if we needed a quick shot of her blurry in the background, or you needed it as a stand-in for lighting while we were busy doing 4 hours of makeup or something like that.
Right.
We just couldn't wait to get started. Like if we had waited to
time's
cast
a waste,
everyone, we would have been sitting around.
Yeah, time's a waste and got to get busy. So then when Jeremy was working on that mask, how did you do, like, we interviewed Jeff Portas once, and he told us about how he did the pins originally on the first pinhead, where there was these little flat metal plates that would sit, up against either the back side of the appliance or, basically up against the guy's face. And then they would they later ended up using tubes where they would insert a nail head or a pinhead into this hollow tube. How did you guys do the pins?
Yeah, we thought about all of that, especially the tube, because there's a lot of pins to have to deal with. But when we, really thought about all of it, we knew we were going to do at least a cowl. So all the pins, and also we knew that we were going to do silicone. So on the cowl, we have all the pins already placed. And then on the prosthetic, it was, we tried to place as many as we could on before, fully applying, and then only kind of having to do a ridge line. Since pinhead is so patterned, Josh had, a great way.
You could hide edges along the lines.
Right. So, and then also it's like, it's basically it was a 2-piece puzzle piece. And I would say, another thing also is Jamie, she's never worn prosthetics before. So we were also, there's things about and things like that. So we, oh my goodness, it's leaving me. What did we make those pins out of? That was the biggest thing. Josh and I, in our very beginning designs, I was looking up different kinds of nails, and I didn't even like
off the shelf stuff.
Yeah, and then just looking at, horseshoe nails looked really cool, but of course they're like way too, big and brawny. This is something that needs to look beautifully grotesque. So it also, that was one thing too, is in the design, instead of it being nails, basically almost like nail heads, it was pearl, like iridescent pins. So then we're like, okay, well, now we have pearls on top of something that needs to look like it's metal. It was a very long, big process to get through it, but why can I not think of plastic tubes.
Yeah, styrene rods.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the way Gary Tunnicliffe did it in 4 and 5.
Yeah, I took the note from him on that, watching some of that behind the scenes stuff and, super gluing them in. But to back all that up, I mean, it was a really long process before we got there, because even before Jeremy Aiello came in and started doing his version, we had another sculptor, Alexi Bustamante, doing his own version on a life cast of one of our friends that we knew we would be able to put the makeup on and test all this out before we got deep into it. And one of the design elements that Dave really was pushing for was he didn't want any of the pins to move. He wanted them to look as if they
like
were
when Doug talked in the other films, they would wiggle and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. He wanted to just avoid having that happen and, put it on us to try to figure out a way. So on our friend's life cast, we were first built a fiberglass underskull that we were going to mount all of the pins to, and get the makeup over it. And it would cover everywhere, like the entire skull cap, and then all of the pins were firmly in place and wouldn't move, and you'd only have a couple around like the nasal labial folds and the top of the lip that just wasn't anything you could do about, or you would restrict the performance. And the caveat we agreed to was like, well, if that's the case, we can probably get a VFX fix on that to stabilize a couple of pins if we needed. So from there, we ended up having this one girl in the shop, Alex, who just became like the pin girl. She spent probably a month just sitting there day after day, brushing these styrene rods with this like iridescent nail polish to get, like, they're not straight up silver. I don't know if any of it will come across on screen, but there's a really like glitter kind of iridescent quality to the metal. And then the pearls on top of them have that same sort of look. So it was incredibly intricate.
Nice.
Then also all those pearls, because then also in the design phase, we finally got, some of those together and put them there. It was, are those pearls a little too big? Should we go with a smaller size? So she dremeled and also when you get pearls, it was a lot of fun. If you just buy, big stock pearls, they usually have a hole through them already, but we needed to make sure that they didn't have any holes. So we had to buy specific pearls of a specific size, and she had to Dremel every single pearl to fit on the styrene.
Wow. So they're real pearls. They're not just some faux pearl.
No, they are faux, but we had to seek out ones that weren't for jewelry, because those have a hole going all the way through them, and these needed to be solid on top and then have the rods fit into the bottom.
Oh, I see. So there was like a half hole.
Yeah.
Zero.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, we had to make half hole. There was zero. The only way to get them is to buy them as whole pearls with zero. So she had to drill each.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Wow.
The
assembly line.
Yeah.
The pearl-headed pins are a design element that span all of the Cenobite characters. They're represented in there somewhere. So that's sort of unique to this movie, is like the Pinhead's pins are on every character somewhere. And that's what's holding a lot of their flesh twisted in different places and just like pinned into their shoulder or their calves. So not only did Alex have to Dremel out like 300 of a specific size pearl, which Dave later changed to a smaller size, so she had to start all over, but she also had to do like 5 different other sizes that were going to be fitting on every other character.
Wow. Wow, that's great. Please continue. What besides pins and doing that, like on that cowl, the silicone, that was a silicone cowl. So did they insert all those pins into that silicone cowl and glue them in from behind and stuff? Or?
Yeah, I had to take a brass tube and sort of punch a hole out of every intersection. And, it was also really difficult to keep them perfectly straight, up and down and symmetrical. But yeah, once those holes were punched in, then we'd take each pin and insert it in there and secure it with some Silpoxy. But that's, from the back. Luckily, that took up, most of the pearls in the makeup. There's probably 130 something of them total, and the cowl probably has 80, something like that.
It was a 147 altogether. I would have to look at, I don't have my notebook. Sorry, I should have had that on.
That will be a trivia question.
But I'll tell you, the ones on the face just became like my bane and Jamie's bane, because as much as I would try to prep each appliance for the next day and glue them all in, inevitably, just the nature of the gel filled silicone, once we got the thing glued onto her face, half of them looked wonky and I'd have to pull them out and re-glue them. And then, you know, be sitting there for 4 hours and Sierra's doing color and finishing the makeup, and I'm just sitting across the trailer staring at her face and going, no, 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 I got to move that one. She's like, oh, are you serious again? I'm like, we have to. I'm sorry. Sometimes I do it in the middle of shooting.
Yeah, it was an everyday dance, for sure. The pins, I mean, I've heard Tunning Cliff say he never wants to touch another pin again. Like, I totally understand. It was ridiculous. It was like the hardest, silliest thing, because sometimes, yeah, sometimes that glue, something, whatever, and you just see it, or the whatever elements we were in, and you just see a pin kind of slowly go down a little, and you're like, hold, you gotta run in there.
Was it something that you could pull out and use? You didn't use Silpoxy when you're on set like that, right? Did you use Prozade, or what did you use?
Well, the one on her face prosthetic, what was it, Sierra? It was like Westmore glue.
Yeah, Westmore glue. But
okay.
then I still had, and it's gone now, and I'm really sad, but I still had Clutch Telesis 5, and that actually worked for some reason, like really well. I mean, obviously it's encapsulated. So her cowl was silicone, but then her face prosthetic was encapsulated gel-filled silicone. So the Telesis 5, it always works like faster, better, quicker. And then also, yeah, Westmore glue and Telesis 8. So it just kind of depended on the day, the moment, you know.
For the encapsulator, did you use Baldi's, or what was the encapsulator?
Yeah,
it was. It wasn't the Baldi's brand. It was Motion Picture Effects makes their own.
Right. Those guys are
clear.
Yeah,
I love their products.
Yeah.
4 layers of the negative and the positive. I think we attempted injecting it in the beginning and just found that we could get it done quicker and easier by just pouring in the material and slamming the mold and clamping it shut really tight.
so we have 2 fiberglass for the mold, the 2 sides. So you have the core and then the sculpture side. Josh was saying in Motion Picture they have a pre-mixed Baldi's, and spray that in. That tended to be the best way for us to make the prosthetic pieces. 1 piece for the face, and then
1 piece for the face?
Really? I mean, on the Doug Bradley pinhead, it's in a couple of pieces and they fit together like a puzzle. But you guys were making all 1 piece from forehead to chin?
Yep.
That's awesome. Okay.
yeah, basically. Yeah.
Now, what was the blender edges like? Like, in other words, you know, I know Jeremy sculpted it, but the way that a silicone appliance is applied and blended, you know, that was my next question, is after you've got a set of appliances and you're going to, you know, go ahead and put the pins in beforehand, how do you apply it and glue it on, and what kind of glue do you use, and how do you blend, you know, the edges and everything?
Yeah, so luckily with it being the 1 face piece, and then having the cowl, because it was grid, you know, pinhead is the grid with the pins. So Josh basically kind of made a puzzle piece out of it. So we would always kind of align it well each time to kind of know like where it goes with the cowl. So cowl goes on first. We mark it, we kind of set everything up, you know, just to make sure, because there were some days where some of the face prosthetics were maybe a little bit softer than other days. So every time before an application, we just kind of set everything up and mark it on Jamie's face. Start with the cowl, basically just using silicone to tack the cowl down. And gluing on the face.
So for the glue,
Mostly it was
So for the
Mhm.
glue that you use to apply it with, it's actually A and B of silicone stuck under the cowl and everything. And does she have a bald cap under there?
Well, yeah, so we ball cap her the AB silicone, and that is just basically like tacking the cowl down and then also tacking around where the prosthetic connected to the cowl, because there was like a bit of a step, like an edge within the pieces, so that would be able to size it up. And then we would have to do glue, like Westmore glue, face, and then the very edge where the face prosthetic and the cowl met, we would have to do like an AB silicone and just kind of tack it all down in like in spots. And then gluing those pins that were around the rest of the edge. Because with that makeup, the bottom of the neck, bottom of the chin, all that is all covered with that neck piece that she has that you see. So that was like saving grace for not having to worry about blending edges. The only thing was around the ears to blend that down.
What
That
a
was
cool
basically-
idea to make that giant neck blender piece. One other question
Yeah.
about coloration, and were you airbrushing on top, or was the intrinsic coloration of the silicone pieces pretty much all that you needed to do, and then just a little, alcohol based paint on top, or what? How did you blend in color?
Yeah, exactly. So pardon me, all the pieces were pre-painted, but then in order to like get into the grid lines, sometimes there would be because there's like a nice oh my goodness, what am I trying to say, a nice kind of texture that was on the cowl, but sometimes wouldn't translate into the face prosthetic. So some days there would have to be a little bit extra modeling on the face, but not too much. And then really it came down to painting the grid lines. That was the main one. And then the eyes and lips, which I just did airbrush with that.
Alcohol base.
Yes. Just being a fan of Hellraiser for so long, this is definitely bucket list. And then also being the person that was doing Pinhead's makeup each time, and having Jamie and I just kind of be the only ones to be around one another. Some days are stressful, even if some days aren't, just to keep a routine. So it's not easy to put someone in a makeup, and she's never, especially who's never done that before. And this is such a big, heavy, makeup to do. So, everyone was, just supporting one another as best that they can. But of course, days were stressed out. I mean, it was a lot. I was freaking out almost every day, even if it was a good day, just thinking like,
Well,
wow, what am I doing?
you guys are amazing, and everybody is loving it. And one of the interviews I heard, where she was, just raving about you and Josh and what you guys have pulled off with this. So, and then for the gel filled, in cap, what kind of silicone was it? I mean, platinum silicone, but was it smooth on,
Yeah,
or?
it was smooth on Ecoflex Gel was the premix stuff.
Oh, the 00 or
They actually sell it as a pre-deadened product. It's called
right.
Ecoflex Gel. So it's just ready to pour. And you can adjust it with more deadener if you need it to be softer, but it's really kind of great right out of the can.
Yeah,
That was able to be used right for those face pieces.
Yeah.
That's great.
We didn't have to futz with the formula and trying to like figure out the percentage of deadener we wanted. It just seemed to work. I mean, I will say that it is a little more stiff than probably, what these people are using when they're Platsil mixes with, 200, 300% deadener.
Yeah. Gel
But-
10. I was using Gel 10 with 250%.
Right. But the great thing about the Ecoflex Gel is like, yeah, it is a little more firm, but you can soften it if you want to add more deadener to it. But the great thing about it right out of the can was like, we didn't really want it to be softer on her face. We needed to keep
you want those pins
stable.
to stay. Yeah.
She doesn't emote very much. She's a very stoic pinhead. She doesn't have those bombastic speaking parts like the Doug Bradley version. So it all worked really well, just like the product as is.
And for coloration, was that, in the mix as well, pigment and stuff like flocking or anything, or?
Let's
I think
see.
some flocking, but in the end, no, we did. We had flocking throughout. I feel like that's the fun part, is because we've gone through so many different processes even before Jamie, and then also during Jamie, and then also once we're in Serbia. Flocking was throughout all of her main hero, but then we had some extras that we did that I know did not have flocking in them, but they weren't used. I'm sorry, that was kind of a boring answer.
No, that's okay. I mean, I understand. Like, in other words, you want to make sure the coloration stays the same throughout and everything. So you got to come up with your formula for mixing up that tone,
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
and then, pre-making all those spaces so then they could all be painted at once, or relatively at once, because then once, when we were in Serbia, we did make more, so it was different because that's a whole another wrench in the wheel, is getting product and teaching new crew.
Local
Yeah.
staff.
Yeah. So that was, I do remember having one of those pinhead faces, and one of our guys, Damian Zimmerman, he came in because it was so deadened. It was like 3 feet long.
Goo, like goo.
And
Yeah,
he
it's
just
like nailed to the top of a door. We would just mark with a Sharpie every day how much further it drew.
How much farther it stretched.
Yeah. But
yeah, it's hard to put something on that's that gooey and soft.
yeah, that was a no go. But we had a whole satellite shop set up in Serbia. We actually have a crew member here in LA who is a native Serbian, so it was like a boon for us. We sent him over there during pre-production ahead of us to gather up the artists he could find and get the shop up and running, because we knew the way that the casting process was going, we would have to end up building quite a bit of this stuff over there. We did as much as we could of the main characters here in LA, and then took them over on a plane. But then there were a lot of the bodysuits were built over there, and a lot of the prosthetics were run over there. So we had to train a lot of these people who'd never worked with those products how to do it. And we just sort of had this round the clock casting room going. The silicone room was just full of these buckets that were labeled for each character. Like Pinhead had her own
colors and
gallons. Oh, here's the Pinhead mix. Run another one of those. Try to streamline it for those guys so they didn't have to try to guess colors every time they made something.
What were the molds made out of?
Mostly fiberglass.
Yeah. Well, and then, but once we got to, mostly fiberglass. I'm trying to think. There was a stone mold that I remember I just absolutely hated, because we had to make it out of stone for some reason. I think it was something that we added on later, and it was just heavy and just such a pain to, you just get used to lightweight, easy, smash this into that, pour, you're good. And then sometimes it was just like, oh, here's that heavy.
Did you buy Ultracal over in Europe, or was it something you brought with you? Or
we had to buy stuff usually either from Hungary or England. Any of our life casting stuff was from like a dental shop in Serbia. I
was going to ask about the life casting, like, here in LA, you might have been able to do body scans or, something like that. But so you were over there using stone knives and bear skins, huh?
I mean, yeah.
Well, what ended up having to happen, we actually got very few life casts on this show because they were casting a lot of these people abroad anyway. The one we got, they cast Chatterer first. He was the first one confirmed on the show, and I didn't want to wait for them to clear up all his legal stuff and all the COVID testings protocols that had to go on then. So I called around, called Vincent Van Dyke's shop, and he had a bust of Jason Lyles, the actor. And then
Oh,
I called Tinsley, and he
Chris,
had a mold of for some reason he just had a mold from, I think it was a Death Note thing that Tinsley had done.
Yeah.
Like a concept piece, but it's a mold that just goes from Jason's knees to his shoulders and down to his elbows. So you have his core and the beginnings of his limbs, and we had to fabricate the rest of that out.
oh,
But
wow.
saved us a couple of weeks. And then
What was that made out of? What was a Tinsley piece?
that was a
Plaster?
big body double mold with plaster bandage and this incredibly elaborate like way to secure it to the jacket.
Yeah.
When you were doing Chatterer and you got that core, that was that just the mold, or did you pull a casting out of that mold to begin sculpting on? Or
Yeah, we made multiple castings. And then also it was one of those, like Josh was saying, we only had so much from those, so then we had to fabricate the rest. So, you know, we had I had him come over, did all of his measurements, you know, fabricated his whole body back together, basically, so that we could kind of build on it. And that's what we did for pretty much everyone. He luckily had, you know, those life casts already done, like Josh said, because it saved us some time. Because we did have some life casts that we had to scratch. So, you know, it's like a waste of time and material. You can't think of it that way, obviously, because things happen. But then that's why we also had to do some life casts in Serbia. So, and doing body casts, basically just trying to get the closest body form to the person that's actually finally greenlit and hired on. That was another
wear it to wear the thing.
Yeah,
difficult.
there were a couple of them that were cast out of Europe or England, and we would just get detailed measurements from them and then go to this place down the street from us. The Mannequin Gallery is this like insane mannequin gallery where you could pretty much walk in and tell this woman, Shelly, like, this is what I need. These are the measurements, and it needs to be in like a prone position. And she would just walk you around like, here it is.
Wow, that's
So,
awesome.
yeah, saved a lot of time and headache. But we couldn't have done that for Jason because the dude's huge. He's super skinny and like 6'9".
And
So
that's
we
the
just got lucky with the life casts the other shops would let us use.
and that's Chatterer.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So go on from there. How did you proceed with Chatterer?
We got Dave Grasso to come in and start the body, and he was working off what Mikey had been doing on the face. And looking at the design, we took the designs and blew them up to life size and put them up on the wall and just let them go at it. And by that point, we had a few other sculptors in there, so it was just like a party every night. Everyone making
Cool.
pictures. Yeah.
Is this monster clay on plaster or fiberglass castings, or
It was almost all Chavant medium. It's what all those guys seem to want to use.
so after the sculpts, then what would happen next?
So then we had a few guys come in from different shops to moonlight and do the molds. And we were really short on time, so we just shimmed them and did fiberglass, really, you know, try to do the whole body mold in half a day, if possible, get it open, get it over to the intern side to clean out, you know, take forever to get the clay out of there. And then we had,
so these are fiberglass exterior overclay, but with like pipes and stuff in it for, you know, strength and
yeah, we had pipes going up through the cores. And then we had, I'm trying to think, we had to have our friend Desmond Smith come in and sew together custom bodysuits to fit over the cores that we were going to cast all the silicone over, so that everything was like, you know, super strong, would hold up for the shoot.
so it would embed into the fabric.
Yeah.
So now you got to make these silicone bodysuits on these fabric custom made skin tight form. Were they zipper backed, or were they top and bottom, or all one big bodysuit?
Everybody was a little bit different. Some were zippers if we could get away with it, but I think you know, one of the Cenobites gasps, she was probably the hardest to do for multiple reasons. But also she's technically supposed to be you know, like totally naked, basically. So that had to be the tightest. And with her also, so we wouldn't have to do a lot of body painting every day when she was on, because we knew that would take a lot of time. So with that, we also, you know, Desmond made super crazy skin tight, perfectly fit suits, and then they were painted basically to look like skin. So hers was, oh my gosh, it was like at least 5 pieces, and I'm being, you know, 5 pieces, and a couple of those pieces we would have to sew her in because of what they were. We would have to sew part of her in every day, like not a big sew, but just like quick stitch, sew some pieces. But she was like a slip-on in some aspects. Chatter.
Picture it like a one-piece bikini.
Uh-huh.
Kind of like that with tights attached to it, and the tights, like Sierra said, they were painted, but they were, before that, they were coated, like sprayed on several layers of silicone so that it was a smooth transition from the body onto the legs, and then they were painted on top of that.
Wow, that sounds cool.
I mean, it was just sort of a random thought that I had. I figured it would work because we were trying to figure out how to make that transition, and we knew trying to blend a suit onto her body every day that she worked, which was like the second most of any of the characters, and making that blend right at the hip joint was just going to be a nightmare. So we wanted it to be something that we could slip on and then deal with the prosthetic portions of it on like just hands, feet, and face. And what Sierra's talking about sewing in, she has these metal, like a lot of the Cenobites do, they all have these like metal attributes to them that are pulling and stretching their skin. So around her wrist, there's like this gauntlet with a spike coming through it, but it has to be coming from seemingly underneath her skin. But it was a real metal piece of armor we had these crazy Serbian armorers make for us. So you have to put that on, stretch the suit over it, sew the wrist together, and then put on a blender transition piece on around her wrist
to hide the seam.
Yeah.
So we got a little ahead of ourselves. Please go back and tell me, like, how many Cenobites were there and what their, you know, I know you guys came up with your own names, Chatter, Pinhead, and what are the other ones?
Gasp, we have Chatterer, we have Weeper, we have Ace-Fix. Oh wait, I should be doing this on my fingers too at the same time. We have Mask, we have Mother, we also have Voight, technically. But we kind of didn't, I mean, we add him in, but he's also a transitional character. So how many did I say?
3, I think, so far. Mother.
We have Pinhead, Gasp, Chatterer, Ace-Fix, Weeper, Mother, Mask, so that's 7, and then Voight would be 8, but Voight technically has 2, so that's like a
3.
Wow, you guys had your hands full.
We made 15 suits all together, I think, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah,
everyone needed doubles, and Voight had 3 stages.
Could we go to a quick description of each of those? Just, you know, run down, you know, like Voight has 3 heads, or, you know, whatever, you know.
Yeah. Pinhead's the obvious. Chatter, I think, is also obvious for everyone, correct?
Right.
Or,
this audience.
yeah. And if you don't know, then no. And then Ace-Fix is basically like, that was a really cool character. So all these, you know, so one thing, and this is just a preference because talking about these characters. So Pinhead, right, there's the box. So that box with this is now incorporated also into all characters as well in some way or form. So with Chatter, he actually had a design of his own of the box, like on the back of his head. So that's kind of what pulls the skin back to show the teeth. And Gasp, she kind of has it a little bit, you know, all over her body. in different forms.
It kind of looks, you know, it's an aesthetic of jewelry in a way.
Yeah.
Right.
We called it
Ornamentation.
Leviathan tech, basically. So everything was designed in a similar way to the way the lament configuration looks, but it's just a piece of mechanical technology that's like torturing them constantly.
So then Acefix like has basically a more tubular Leviathan tech that is holding the hands together and also tightening these tension cables to basically bind this character. And then also the skin is peeled over the face and the head is back. So it's asphyxiation, basically just trying to really get that looking super uncomfortable. I mean, there's like, you know, so this character is also, since asphyxiated, a little bit not slow, but when it's bound, like slow. And then, you know, can I spoiler alert, Josh, and like say,
Yeah, we're not going to print until after it's released. So
yeah, so then Acefix, there is a part where he does get out of his Leviathan configuration, the cables come loose, and now he's, instead of being like kind of slow, barely able to breathe or move, is now just this wild creature, super fast, like chasing after these kids, you know, super scary.
wow.
Weeper, I don't know, Josh, you could, I mean, that's, Weeper was the coolest and we were super excited for Weeper, but with, I think, time constraints and all the things that we were planning on doing and some of the scenes that were really going to be cool. And I'm super bummed that we weren't able to do it, but Weeper actually had a lot more to her than you see. She has a lot of really cool changes that happen with her Leviathan like configuration that change her entire body, and she basically kind of falls apart and it turns into this really cool The Thing, you know, spider gremlin kind of deal that we did unfortunately not get to make.
You see hints of it though. We do have her arms unfolding. Like basically the tech is her arms are bisected up the middle of the fingers to the elbow, and then they unfold into like double arms that she's able to control separately. So that's
Wow.
What about the one called Mother?
Mother was really cool too. Also
pregnant Cenobite.
yeah, no time, but it was one of those when we were talking to Dave and Keith Thompson and everything, Dave Breckner and Keith Thompson about it. So Mother, oh my goodness, I don't remember what they're called, but those like old, you know, late 1800, early 1900, like wax anatomy, like plastinization, but they were like wax sculptures. So it was almost like something that, you know, Michelangelo would, they still had that kind of generic like Greek face. And so there was one Dave used for reference, and it was like a pregnant woman. And so for that, you know, because this is also old anatomy, where people were cutting people open to like then draw from the cut open people what things look like. Also, it had its own kind of artistic look to it because, you know, we're full of weird meats and garbly-gooks. So this like wax picture of this pregnant woman with a baby inside. So then we were talking about making Mother, and it's like, well, does she have this like weird window to a baby? Like you see the fetus in her belly and like this stuff. And it was really cool in the way that with those sculptures and also those drawings, it was really fluid and kind of pretty, you know. So she was cut open and almost like, it almost looked like whatever, like the demigorgons in Stranger Things, like the flower face, like, so it was like pretty skin that was like kind of pulled back, but a kind of nice little wave and fluidity to it. And it's only in 4 sections to like show this baby. And then we were like, well, is that too much? Is that too grotesque? You know, so it was a lot of back and forth. So instead, we just gave her razors for fingers, and she just cuts her body up a whole bunch and has like a a cut up pregnant belly. And then her skin is pulled down to kind of reveal her skull cap, and the skin is pulled down over her face like a nun veil or something. But the skin also through her face, we used, you know, a very translucent kind of silicone, so you could see through the veil, so you could see the sides of her face that the veil is covering. She was a lot of fun. She was
And that's Mother. That's cool.
Mother. Yeah, and then Mask is the one, he's basically he's scroll, what do you call the people that make scrolls? So his Leviathan tech, right? So on his fingers, like he has wires to his fingers, you know, in his whole body. It looks like he's, you know, wearing basically he's cut into himself, scrolled into himself. He is the piece of paper, and his fingers
Nice.
also cutting himself, and his Leviathan tech is a bunch of wires to his fingers.
Scribe is what you were trying to think. Yeah, he's drawn all these hieroglyphic, you know, ancient Hellraiser world symbols all over his body.
And that was fun. We put all of our crew's names on the back, which was
Hidden.
but nobody will see it. That was for us.
Well, it's written in a dead language. So.
Tell us about Voight.
Voight is basically your main villain. He's your Frank reference that gets all the way through opening the puzzle, solving the puzzle box, and then instead is tortured with this huge device that was dubbed the Loom, implanted through the middle of his torso. So it's a really crazy out there concept that everyone was sort of on pins and needles trying to figure out if it was going to be goofy looking, but it got dialed in really well. So you see on the front of him is this very old world mechanical calculator looking device with these spinning wheels that have his nerve endings pulled from his chest, and they just at random moments will tighten and just send him into incredible pain and convulsions. And then out the back of him is the rest of that thing. It really looks like a big engine kind of piece of machinery. And then by the end, when he's made a deal with the Cenobites, that gets removed from his body and he thinks he's free. But then he is himself transformed into a new Cenobite. So I mean, it's not really correct to call that first one a Cenobite, but just for the terms of what we had to make, we called it, this is his Cenobite 1 form. And then when he turns into a proper Cenobite, you're actually seeing the process of how Leviathan is sort of magically hands-free pulling and twisting these characters' flesh into place and turning them into their final form. So he's laying on this big like cross-sized table, and you get to watch all of the skin flay and peel and twist and watch his body just fall into like past pain into ecstasy.
So how did you achieve all that?
So that transformation was devised to be 2 different suits. And they were basically, we got the actor Goran to come in once he was on location in Serbia. And we did a body cast with him laying flat on a table with his arms out the way he was going to be positioned, and then sculpted the whole thing as a 3/4 layover suit that we would just glue onto him when he was laying down on a table. The first form of it we did following the designs, which is the finished form with all of the skin peeled back and really neatly and artfully placed where it goes. And then we made a mold of that out of, this is the only big heavy silicone mold we made. It's probably what Sierra was trying to think of earlier, like what was this ridiculous mold, but it had to be this way because we needed to reuse the sculpture. So we did a big silicone brush up mold on him with big sectioned fiberglass pieces to be able to open it without damaging the sculpture. And then we had all the sculptors go back over the twisted and pulled flesh, erase it, and put his body back to like normal, complete nude skin with the incision marks where the stuff was going to pull. And then all of those flaps were then removed from the sculpture and molded separately. Everything was run and then seamed onto the body. So you had like basically like if he was just standing up, which he did a few times to go to the bathroom, he looks like a butcher shop. He's just dangling meat falling off of his body. But when he's laying flat on a table, all of those flaps seamed up against him. And then we would attach fishing line to them and all that and puppeteer them from off screen to do the flaying motion with no one touching it. So
cool.
it's
And then
one of the
CG
most,
removal of wires and things if you needed and touch it up.
yeah, there was no problem for them to erase monofilament and stuff. And maybe a green screen hand or two that had to get in somewhere close.
And
But
move
it was like it's the kind of effect that like would totally just be relegated to VFX in most productions. Like if this were something on TV or even most movies who didn't have experience doing these kind of effects, they would have said, "Ah, the CG guys got it. Just show us the final form, and then we'll just make him look normal and do all the peeling in the computer." And none of us wanted to do that. Dave was adamant we figured this out, and it's one of the most fun effects in the movie.
It wouldn't have been Hellraiser with that kind of stuff, without that in there.
That's what we all said. That was our mantra every time we talked about, like, well, let's just fix it in the computer. Like, no. God damn it, this is Hellraiser.
Thank you. That's what we want. So go on now. Tell us what from that VFX touch-up stuff, and did you have to do, like all these other creature effects, like the removal of the head, the green screen sock? Was there other things like that for some of the other ones, like the tubes and stuff that go in the other guy?
I mean, I think we knew that there was going to be, especially again, back to how many Cenobites we had. And we had 3 days where it was all of them, on the same day, those were big days. So they, especially wear and tear and going through and all the weather, and we knew that there was always going to be some cleanup, but we always try to not rely on that the best that we could.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of CG augmentation, it was all sort of planned out from the beginning. But like, let's be clear, this is a rubber monster movie top to bottom. The CGI is not creating anything. All it's doing is pinching forms and changing geometry, just
cleaning things up a little bit, and removing and stuff. That's great. I love to hear that. I mean, VFX and practical can work together and play nice.
100%. And I think also, we did with Keith Thompson and Dave Bruckner, we did The Ritual together. So we also already had that kind of
working relationship and everything.
Relationship in the 50-50 with the CG and the practical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like one fun thing where we needed like green screen removal stuff was when we were talking, I was saying Weeper's arms bisect and separate and she controls them. So we did that with a few different methods. We built gloves that went on her and they were cut down the middle. So she would put a green screen glove on first. And then depending on the shot, she would put half of her hand into one side of the glove. And then we would put a foam insert with armature wire in the other half of it and pose it how we needed to, and then rod puppeteer that. And then it would change depending on what her action was. She would put her hand into the other side of the glove. So you can't really track, which side is the puppet side and which side is the actor side, because the way it edits together, it just looks like all of the fingers are constantly doing something.
That's cool.
All they had to do was rod removal and green screen removal.
When you guys made that big body form mold and everything and had to sculpt all that, who sculpted all that stuff? Was it members of the crew from America that came over and you, or was it people in Serbia as well?
Are you referring to the Voight thing? That was all in Serbia. We had a team over there, probably like 6 or 7 different sculptors working on that thing all at once.
Were they the kind of guys that had been in that area working on other movies? Because so many American films have been coming over there to film and stuff.
Oddly enough, no, not at all. Because there is so much production over there, like most people were just busy at the time. What we ended up getting for our crew seemed to be a whole lot of like art students or art majors that had worked classical sculpture and that sort of stuff. We have one guy, Mickey.
I was just gonna say, Mickey.
Mickey, the Tom Savini of Serbia. He's the guy behind the Serbian film.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. And
That's
Hellraiser's like
incredible.
his favorite thing in the world. So he was elated to be
Wow,
on it with
so
us.
he was happy. Nina, do you have any questions?
Oh, well, I was able to see the pictures of the mask
mask
that came out so recently.
in
So
Entertainment
yeah,
Weekly
he was really interesting. I was trying to describe it to Ed. So
with no head.
so the mask itself was a practical physical
Rubber-
thing in front
rubber
of that
piece.
in front of the actor's head.
Yeah. And then we had, like Josh had brought up, but we had our Serbian jewelers, and they made all of our weird things, halos, whatever we kind of needed. Pretty jewelry on these disgusting creeps.
Yeah. He also the mask picture that we saw today, he reminded me just a wee bit of Robotrix from
Metropolis.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
it was one of those where it was really funny because making that, especially like Josh had said, Mother and Mask, they were going to be cut, if anything. And we're like, nope, we're doing it. We're
I'm
going
so
on.
glad. I'm so glad they're not cut. That's
Uh,
fantastic.
yeah, but it was funny because once, and Vule, well, we called him Vule, and I'm going to butcher the name if I say his name in Serbian, so I'm not, but we called him Vule for short. And he was the actor that played the mask. And once he put, and Vule's voice as well is just kind of this, he was a young lad, but very deep voice. And he was always such a, I don't know, he was just always such a pleasure, always having fun, loved to dance in the suit. Sometimes that was kind of the hardest part, was wrangling, like, please don't dance too hard right now.
It was ridiculous. He was never where he was supposed to be. He'd walk off in the middle of like getting ready to shoot. And, like, where's Mask? He's in the parking lot surrounded by people dancing. Vule,
Yeah.
get over here. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Josh. He
Yeah.
doesn't like me very much.
Yeah, it's one of those where he just had such a fun, beautiful voice and this like stretched skin. So, and obviously it's like when you don't have your facial features and someone's laughing, it's like if you get, you take all of the muscles away from your skin, but someone's laughing and just their mouth's opening and you hear the laughter. It's so eerie and weird. So
How about that face, the mask face? Does that move? Does it talk or anything?
well, he talks in it, but it's also, it's pulled his face, so it's only his lips that move. So it's just weird.
And he can't see through those eyes because there's no eyeballs, right?
No,
There's just
well, yeah, he could see. So it was basically just a green screen hood that we glued everything to, and then cut out for his mouth and nose and all that, and his eyes, so he could see. Well, his eyes, they didn't. We had a couple different ones, but and then his mouth, it would just, that's where the glue point would be, around his mouth, so that it would stay with his mouth.
so you had a couple of different versions so that a different shot might look a slightly different facial expression or something.
No, not necessarily. It was also just it was just backup.
Oh, okay.
Back also, since we had to make these characters there, it was kind of like, because you kind of go back and forth, like, okay, well, now we're gonna glue, what part are we gonna glue the silicone to his lips? Are we gonna make sure that the whole green screen is completely on there? So then we cut away, so then we're gluing the green screen piece too, like which one is best? Because also when you're gluing something to the lips and having something that's a thick piece of silicone, well, not that thick, but it's a thick piece of silicone. It's not like an old age makeup where you do something super thin or whatever, and it's also away from his face, but you still want to have the motion of the lips. There's a lot of little intricate things to think about that.
Yeah, you're battling with the bits of rubber.
Right. Battling the rubber, and also, how can we how can we tame the rubber, and also how can we tame the rubber on, you know, a lot of these actors have never worn prosthetics before as well, you know. I mean, like Josh said, like it was like, where did Wule go? He's literally dancing with some, you know, people in
Extra.
like, Wule, get over here, come on. That's the other part of the job that people forget about that we have to do as well.
Wrangling.
Yeah.
Wrangling.
Yeah, not to mention staying late and removing all that.
Don't even get.
Yeah.
You know what? I will, you know, I'm not going to go into detail because it wasn't only me, but there were at least 2 good nights where there were tears, just like, oh my gosh, like what a day. Because also before thinking about all these things, I was freaking out because when they wanted to shoot, I was like, we're going to have a hot summer. And these people are in silicone suits. So we were going through that as well. I was looking into,
Even in
like,
Serbia, it's hot. It's not cold.
oh, yeah, no, the weird thing with Serbia was it's basically kind of like LA, except
Oh,
it's all of the other things as well. So we also didn't think about some of these nights that were going to be so absolutely freezing. And some of our performers, you know, like they're
half
athletic.
naked. Yeah, they're naked basically.
Yeah, naked, and they don't have a lot of body fat. And I was like, well, you know, in my head, I was like, I'm not too worried about the cold opposed to the heat for some of them, but then you have Gasp, and she just has a thin brush, not brush on, but like, you know, basically powder coated leggings of silicone. Like that's not thick enough to keep her warm, and she's tiny. Selena Lowe, she's a tiny, beautiful little thing, and she was such a trooper through it. But I have a video of her, and in her character, she kind of has her skin flaps that basically kind of like cover her butt, basically. She was jumping up and down in her little skin flap. I wasn't paying
Just
attention.
trying to keep warm. Just trying to keep warm.
Warm, jumping up and down, but I wasn't looking at her while she was jumping up and down. So I just hear, and I see her, I look over and I hear this cute little like clapping. It's like, who's clapping right now? It's just her like jumping up and down, trying to keep warm, or like,
He's
you know,
twerking.
yeah, it was, you know, it was either too hot or too cold. There was no, you know, there weren't too many comfortable days for anyone, but it all worked out in the end. I'm really proud of what we all got to do and accomplish, especially for a lot of the actors that have never worn these things before and gone this far. So, you know.
Did you have to put methyl cellulose all over them for shiny and wet?
So yeah, let's talk about that. So we did metho, and of course when it's hot, like that stuff dries up really fast, and then so J lube, you know, so then we just had, when we needed
buckets of it.
J lube, and then but that on the cold nights, that's what really, it was like, oh shit, you know, they're covered in J lube to get in. And so now they're just coated in J lube and cold. So then we just had a bunch of like warming
heater units.
Yeah, you know, tents, all of it. But it was, you know, it was just, you know, some days were really taxing on everyone.
There's a great photo I gotta try to dig up where I've got like 4 Cenobites sitting next to each other in chairs covered in blankets. It's full costume, you know.
Napping.
These are the refugees from the Cenobite camp, you know.
Having like a little granola crumble in their lap.
It'll make a great meme someday.
Yeah, but they were just covered in stuff all the time. Like, we used a lot of silicone fluid for faces and stuff, like just to give it a wet look. But in the designs, all the skin is peeled back. Every character has sections of their body that is just showing raw muscle tissue. And it was all sculpted in and painted, but there was one night where Dave just asked us to put, you know, some blood to try to make it look as wet as possible on the muscle tissue. And we just like kind of caked in this gel blood, and it looked really great. So unfortunately that became the thing every single night, getting them ready.
More gel blood.
Yeah, it'd be like, blood them up. The ADs would be screaming, all right, they're on in 10 minutes, blood them up. And then we'd have to wash all that crap off every night and get it off the suits. They'd be in trash bags and sticky when you'd pull them out at the shop. It was really fun.
You have to clean them and get them at least decent enough for them to get into them again.
Mhm.
None of us slept. There are plenty of videos and pictures of me in my giant suitcase in my office, sleeping in my suitcase with powder.
Oh, I hope you can share that stuff with us. You know, I want to illustrate this article. You know? Tell me about those days, those 3 days you were mentioning where all the Cenobites had to be on set.
Oh my gosh, I'm glad it wasn't just the two of us doing all of them. Yeah, we would stagger them. I think the other thing was in the beginning with all the pre-production, talking about how we're going to do these makeups, you know, Josh and I were very adamant on trying to make sure that it wasn't something each character, you know, a 10-piece makeup to blend. You know, we're trying to figure out, especially this is the most Cenobites ever in a Hellraiser. So, you know, what makes it easy production, especially when we don't have as many days for prep that we want, and we also don't have that many days to shoot. But we had, oh my goodness, we had at least 2 per Cenobite for Cenobite days, which, you know, still isn't enough. And then there, you know, you also have to take in breaks that people need, or actors as well.
Potty
so people
breaks.
just, yeah, so there's certain, one of our seamstress, I mean, he's a little bit of master of all. He does a little bit of everything, but Desmond Smith, he would bounce to all of the different Cenobites because he made the undersuits for them. But yeah, the biggest makeups were Pinhead, Gasp. Mother was a pretty big paint job. And so we had certain artists stick to that so that it was consistent for those days. But usually it was about 2 people per Cenobite, and we would do at least 3 at a time. And I remember the first time that we ever had to do it, I was absolutely nervous. Like, we have 8 makeups to do in so much time. And we all felt very good. We got it. And I was I was shocked. I was shocked that we got it done so well.
How does the Cenobite get ready? Like, in other words, I've heard in the past that sometimes when somebody has to wear a skin tight monster suit, they might actually put KY or something all over their like leotard to slide them into it. You know, what did you guys do? Like, how did you get them into those silicone suits? And then, you know, somebody's working on hands and somebody's working on face, you know.
Yeah, you got it. I mean, we had basically like a J-Lube KY mix, and we would just for those skin tight suits, we would just slap them in. Yeah.
And so did you have like one of those 2 people that was going to be doing a Cenobite, helping them with everything, like getting them in the suit as well as putting on their head, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very, it varied. Like I said, Desmond is more of our seamstress suit maker. He's a great artist, but he doesn't do makeup. So he was basically kind of at the forefront of helping slide actors in the suits, and then certain
like
parts.
a dresser, like a
Yeah,
dresser.
and then but then also we talked about it how Gasp is actually sewn in to her suit. She's all in, so he and another artist would be basically sewing her in, jump to the next one. Hands, feet are being done by 2 to 3 other artists at a time. Sometimes we have to move the Cenobites around, or one artist would at least know how to do 2 Cenobites. Also, it's good to, I wanted to make sure we also didn't have just one person who knew the one thing. Everyone kind of needed to know at least 2 Cenobites and how to get them ready just in case anything came up in the future or somebody got
Cross
sick or anything like
cross
that,
training.
you know. Yeah. It was very
What about their
it was a
feet?
lot. So everyone had some form of like a foot kind of stocking gasp. She was the only one that would be completely barefoot. Everyone else had some form of like a monster foot, which also was a little difficult for certain days. If they got too much sweat or if they had too much you know,
Slime
lube to
or
get them
blood.
slime, yeah, and then it was just a little bit, you know, little. Sometimes we had some wobbly Cenobites. Luckily, they don't have to move too much, you know. So it wasn't easy. Some days were easier than others. That's the funny part, you know. You say how long it takes to get an actor ready, and some days the slime's not slimy enough or too slight, you know, whatever it is. But and it's the suits aren't all very comfortable. I don't know anyone who was too comfortable in their suit. It's not an easy game, especially we did have one morning or one night, and it was an overnight, and Josh and I in the beginning we were just so worried about people getting heated in the suits, and this one it was the opposite. I was worried about them getting hypothermia or something, you know, because it was just so cold outside, and even though you have a layer of silicone on you, there's still that kind of gel in the center, you know, that's your body's kind of absorbing. So it was a cold Cenobite night. I felt bad for them, but everybody was a trooper. Everyone was fine, you know, no one got hurt, luckily. We have quick handheld travel
Airbrush.
airbrushes, which
Yeah.
yeah, and then also just in case, you know, I have my favorite kind of makeup brushes that are just like a quick, you know, modeling effects brush for little spots, because also with as much as we seal up and everything, you know, there's wear and tear over time, especially in thigh rubbing areas and arm rubbing
Right.
areas. So
Joints.
yeah, all the joint kind of places, or, you know, armpits. So yeah, just having to run in and do a quick giant brush with modeling real. And luckily, you know, that was another thing within the paint jobs. I think, you know, you just make sure that there is some nice easy form to kind of replicate in a quick moment if you ever needed to. So that was good.
What about lighting, like on set? Like, in other words, were you having to work in darkness, or could you take them off to a work light spot, you know, or something?
Yeah, it was on and off, because there were sometimes where it was a little like off the beaten path, but it was usually, though, whenever it was too dark, it was so dark there was never any need to do
to fix it.
crazy
Yeah.
touch ups. Yeah, which was good, but it's still one of those where, you know, you're also just making sure you're still watching multiple
Covered. Yeah.
Cenobites, make sure other things, you know, wiggles and wrinkles and stuff like that aren't happening too much, making sure that they shine and they are being seen enough. So that was the other thing. We used a lot of silicone fluid to make them shiny.
Cool.
So keeping up on that, especially outside, whenever we shot outside in the elements, that was, and then also silicone fluid, you know, could take off any touch-up paints that you had just done, and or if we had to add blood, now silicone fluid's in the way, so you have to clean up, and then, you know, there was always a dance that had done. So we have our own blood, and then there is a trick that works pretty well, but it depends, especially if I already put silicone fluid on it, it does not work as well. But soap, like Dawn dish soap, just kind of rubbing a little bit on first before. But
Right.
yeah, there's that smooth on blood, the smooth on silicone blood, and we would just basically recolor that to match our coloring. And then I think I had to make a really quick kind of not quite a 50-50, but alcohol kind of base blood just for small touch-ups. A lot of gel blood. The cleanup and removal is one where you're, especially at the end of a long day, it feels like you didn't even do it. For Jamie and Gasp, they took the most. I would try to at least have, if I could, 4 people at a time to do it, but sometimes it would just be 2 people until like when we had our full Cenobite day, you know, we would get I would have 1 person per the easy. I would always have at least 2 people on any of the big makeups. Try to squeeze 3 if I could.
Right.
Yeah, and chatter is basically just gloves and pull over. And then it was mostly, it would be something that was very much a full makeup, or, you know, yeah, not, again, try to make everybody pretty easy. So a lot of pull over masks or pieces put together, like mask. He was just a green screen hood, you know.
The man who made the metal pieces, you know, the Leviathan tech stuff. And if you were, you know, to talk any more about that a little bit, about you guys mentioned the one metal like spike piece on the wrist, and you know, I know Jamie has that one thing on her throat, and you know, can you talk about any more of the metal Leviathan?
Well,
Yeah, that was a mixture. Yeah, Josh, you go ahead first.
Steven Stefanovic was in charge of making like the metal armor pieces in Serbia, and that's just like the thing around like masks, belt area, and the Weeper has these like high heel spike kind of things going through her feet. But then like the gold Leviathan tech pieces, we made those in LA. It was actually Sierra's brother, Jeremy Spence, 3D designed that stuff in the computer. And then I 3D printed them here.
Oh, I see.
We have
Wow,
them
that's
gold
cool.
plated.
That's great, man. That's very interesting.
One thing to clarify, the feet on the Cenobites, Gasp, Mother, and Mask were all barefoot, and we had to do blenders around their ankles. Chatterer was head to toe 100% suit. There was no makeup involved with him. Weeper was the same way. And Acefix was almost 100% suit. And then we had to do these little, we had like gaunt knuckle prosthetics that went over the tops of the hands. So those had to be glued on and blended against the suit. So that was the only makeup involved there. Just because of like how loaded up those shoot days were, we would be going through a massive number of setups per day. So I would spend the end of each day having like a really long discussion looking through the call sheet with our second AD and talking specifically about the order of operations, like
to prepare them. Which
Yeah.
Cenobites are going to be on set first.
All right. Yeah, it's going to take 25 minutes to get Chatterer ready. So let's not even worry about bringing him in until later, since he doesn't shoot until this scene happens. And it was just the constant back and forth that you have, where we're obviously a big concern for the set, but not the only ones. You still have the actors to contend with and their turnaround times. So it'd be like, oh, we can't shoot this scene with Weeper until we can get, you know, Drew to come in at 5 o'clock. So let's bring in Yinka, who plays Weeper, at, you know, 4 o'clock, and she can get breakfast, and then it'll take 30 minutes to get her into her suit.
And you're talking 4 a.m.
Yeah. So it was just that, like every single day trying to work out those logistics, and we could never get it perfect. Me and the second AD were always crying together about how impossible it was to really do good scheduling for this, but we just had to do the best that we could with it.
Well, you guys are real troopers. You know, I love hearing these kind of stories, and I love finding out that Jeremy worked on it and all these great people. I guess we should wrap it up. I mean, you have anything you want to add?
So
one of the things I wanted to ask was, what is the current new project you guys are working on? I mean, of course, as long as it's not a non-disclosure thing.
No, we actually just wrapped it last week. It's there was a movie called Last Shift that came out in 2014, and it did pretty well on the streamers, but it was an extremely low budget, and the director was never really satisfied with it and got an opportunity to remake it for 10 times his budget. So it's interesting. The announcement for it actually just came out today. It's through a new production company called Welcome Villain, and it's just another kind of bloody gore fest, demonic possession sort of movie. It's got a lot of Hellraiser to it. So why we were drawn.
Cool. What's up on the horizon now for you guys?
So as of yesterday, it just started the next movie, which is from Stuart Ortiz. He's the guy that did these movies, Grave Encounters, Grave Encounters 2 a few years ago. I remember seeing those on streaming. This movie is like a weird occult serial killer movie. We're gonna be doing a lot of crime scene photos and things like that. Just look with a lot more gore.
Like 7 or something.
Yeah, well, I like that big mystery serial killer movie.
Cool.
It's called Strange Harvest.
All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much. I guess we'll wrap it up.
All right, it was great.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, I really appreciate you keeping up with me on this. I know it's taken a long time for us to get to do it, but it was everything I wanted. So thanks,
All right.
Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you.